Everyone in the room held their breath. You could hear a pin drop in the most dangerous club in New York City. Lorenzo Valenti, the man they called the Butcher of Brooklyn, had his hand wrapped around the throat of a trembling waitress. He didn't want an apology. He wanted entertainment. He pointed the barrel of his gun toward the dusty grand piano in the corner and sneered, "Play something, sweetheart. If you bore me, you die." He thought he was mocking a clumsy nobody. He had no idea that the woman standing before him was a ghost from a past. He thought he had buried a prodigy who had lost everything except her talent. What happened next didn't just save her life. It brought the most powerful man in the city to his knees. This is the story of Sophie Bennett. The rain battered against the blackened windows of the Gilded Cage, a members-only supper club tucked away in the shadowy recesses of the meat-packing district. Inside, the air smelled of expensive cigars, leather, and fear. Sophie Bennett adjusted her apron, her hands shaking slightly as she balanced the tray of crystal tumblers. She had been working here for 3 weeks, and every shift felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers. The clientele wasn't just wealthy, they were dangerous. Men with Italian silk suits and eyes that looked dead inside. But the tips were cash, and no one asked for a background check. For a woman trying to disappear, the Gilded Cage was perfect. "Table 4 needs a refill, now." The floor manager, a weaselly man named Rick, hissed in her ear, "And don't look him in the eye." Rick didn't have to specify who him was. The atmosphere in the club had shifted the moment Lorenzo Enzo Valenti walked in. The music had grown quieter, the laughter more forced. Enzo was the don of the Valenti crime family, a man whose name was whispered in fear from the Bronx to Staten Island. He sat in the large circular booth in the center of the room, flanked by 2 bodyguards who looked like they were carved out of granite. Sophie took a deep breath, keeping her eyes on the floor, and approached the table. "Gentlemen," she murmured, her voice barely audible. She reached out to place a fresh glass of Macallan 25 in front of Enzo. Enzo didn't look up. He was busy lighting a cigarette, the flame illuminating the sharp, predatory angles of his face. He was devastatingly handsome, in the way a storm is beautiful before it destroys your house. Dark hair, darker eyes, and a scar cutting through his left eyebrow that only added to his menacing allure. Just as Sophie set the glass down, one of the bodyguards, a brute named Rocco, laughed loudly at a joke and threw his arm out. His heavy hand collided with Sophie's elbow. The tray tipped. Time seemed to slow down. Sophie watched in horror as the amber liquid launched from the glass, splashing directly onto the lapel of Lorenzo Valenti's pristine charcoal suit. The entire club went silent. The piano player in the corner stopped mid-chord. Enzo froze. He slowly looked down at the stain spreading on his jacket, then up at Sophie. His eyes were cold void of any human warmth. "I'm so sorry, sir," Sophie stammered, grabbing a napkin and instinctively reaching out to dab the mess. "It was an accident." Rocco grabbed her wrist, twisting it painfully. "Don't touch him." Enzo raised a hand, and Rocco released her instantly. Enzo stood up, towering over her. He unbuttoned his jacket and tossed it onto the seat behind him. He looked at Sophie like she was a bug he couldn't decide whether to crush or study. "Rick," Enzo barked. The manager scurried over, sweating profusely. "Mr. Valenti, I am so sorry. She's new. She's clumsy. I'll fire her immediately." "Quiet," Enzo said softly, and Rick shut his mouth with an audible click. Enzo stepped closer to Sophie. He could smell her fear, but underneath it, he smelled something else. Vanilla and defiance. She was trembling, yes, but she hadn't run away. She was staring at his chest, refusing to meet his gaze, but she was standing her ground. "You ruined a $5,000 suit," Enzo said, his voice a low rumble. "How do you plan to pay for that ragazza?" "I can work it off," Sophie whispered. Enzo laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You'd have to work here for a year to pay for the buttons." He looked around the room, bored. He had come here to relax after a grueling meeting with the Russian mob, and now he was wet and annoyed. His eyes landed on the grand piano in the corner. The regular pianist, an old man named Arthur, had fled the bench the moment the drink spilled. A cruel idea formed in Enzo's mind. He wanted to see this girl squirm. He wanted to break that tiny bit of defiance he sensed in her. "You know," Enzo said, circling her, "Rick tells me you're useless, clumsy, a waste of space." Sophie said nothing. "But maybe you have hidden talents." Enzo grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. Her eyes were a startling shade of green, wide and terrified. "Do you play?" He gestured to the piano. Sophie's heart hammered against her ribs. She hadn't touched a piano in 3 years. Not since the fire. Not since her father died, and her name was Sofia Castellan, the daughter of a disgraced judge. She had buried that life. "No," she lied. Enzo smiled, revealing straight white teeth. It was a wolf smile. "I think you're lying. You have long fingers. Pianist fingers." He pulled his gun from his holster, a sleek black Beretta, and placed it on the table with a heavy thud. The room gasped. "Here is the deal," Enzo announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent club. "You sit at that bench. You play me something worthy of my time. If you entertain me, I forget the suit. I might even tip you." He leaned in close, his lips brushing her ear. "But if you refuse, or if you play like a toddler, Rocco takes you out back and teaches you a lesson on respect. Do we understand each other?" Sophie looked at the gun, then at Rocco, who was cracking his knuckles. She looked at Rick, who turned away, refusing to help her. She had no choice. "I understand," she whispered. "Good." Enzo sat back down, crossing his legs and taking a sip of his drink. "Impress me." The walk to the piano felt like a march to the gallows. Sophie could feel the eyes of every heavy hitter in New York burning into her back. She could feel Enzo's gaze most of all, heavy, expectant mocking. She sat on the leather bench. It was still warm from the previous player. The keys grinned up at her black and white teeth, waiting to bite. "Don't do it," a voice in her head screamed. "If you play like you used to, he'll know. Someone might recognize the style. You're supposed to be Sophie Bennett, a high school dropout from Ohio. Not Sofia Castellan, the prodigy from Juilliard." But the image of Rocco's heavy fists flashed in her mind. She had to play. She just had to play well enough to survive, but not well enough to be remembered. She placed her hands on the keys. Her fingers trembled. "Today, sweetheart," Enzo shouted from the booth. "I'm losing patience." Sophie closed her eyes. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of old wood and polish. Instinct took over. Muscle memory dormant for 3 years woke up with a jolt. She didn't start with something simple. She couldn't. The fear, the anger, the grief of the last 3 years, it all came rushing to her fingertips. She struck the first chord of Rachmaninoff's prelude in C-sharp minor. Bam! The heavy, ominous chords rang out through the club like church bells announcing a funeral. It was dark, aggressive, and technically demanding. Enzo, who had been lifting his glass to his lips, paused. He lowered the glass. Sophie forgot the room. She forgot the gun on the table. She forgot she was a waitress. She was back in the conservatory, pouring her soul into the instrument. Her fingers flew across the keys, a blur of motion. The middle section of the piece agitated, frantic, breathless, mirrored her own racing heart. She played with a violence that shocked everyone. This wasn't background music. This was a war cry. She leaned into the piano, her hair falling from its messy bun, cascading over her face. She attacked the keys, extracting every ounce of emotion from the instrument. At the table, Enzo Valenti sat motionless. He knew music. His mother had been an opera singer before the life swallowed her up. He knew that what he was hearing wasn't just good. It was world class. It was the kind of talent that cost thousands of dollars an hour to witness in a concert hall. But it was more than the skill. It was the pain. He could hear a deep, agonizing sorrow in every note. It resonated with the darkness inside him. For the first time in years, something touched the cold, dead space in his chest where his heart used to be. He watched her hands. They were scarred rough from scrubbing tables and washing dishes, yet they moved with the grace of a swan. Who was she? Sophie hit the final thundering chords. The sound hung in the air, vibrating against the crystal glasses, before fading into absolute silence. For 10 seconds, no one moved. No one breathed. Sophie sat slumped over the keys, her chest heaving, sweat beading on her forehead. The reality of what she had done crashed down on her. She had exposed herself. She had shown them the one thing she had left. Slowly, the sound of a single person clapping broke the silence. Clap, clap, clap. Sophie turned. Enzo was standing. He wasn't smiling anymore. His expression was intense, unreadable. He walked toward the stage, ignoring his bodyguards who scrambled to follow. He stopped right next to the piano bench. Sophie looked up, terrified he was going to hit her, for being too loud, for being too much. Instead, Enzo reached out and tucked a strand of loose hair behind her ear. His fingers were hot against her cold skin. "That wasn't a waitress playing," Enzo said quietly, his voice devoid of the mockery he had used earlier. "Who are you?" "I'm just Sophie," she stammered, pulling back. "Liar," he whispered. He turned to the room, which was still stunned. "Everyone out," he commanded. "But boss," Rocco started, "we haven't finished the—" "I said out!" Enzo roared, slamming his hand onto the lid of the piano. The sound cracked like a gunshot. "Clear the room! Now!" Chairs scraped. People scrambled. Within 2 minutes, the gilded cage was empty, save for Sophie Enzo and his 2 guards standing by the door. Enzo turned back to her. The air between them crackled with electricity. He looked at her not as a servant, but as a puzzle he was desperate to solve. "You owe me a suit," he said, his voice dropping to a seductive purr. "But I think I've found a different way for you to pay your debt." Sophie stood up, her legs shaky. "I should go. My shift is over." "Your shift is over when I say it is." Enzo stepped closer, backing her against the piano. He trapped her there, placing his hands on the edge of the instrument on either side of her waist. "You aren't going anywhere, Sophie. You belong to me now, until I figure out exactly who you are and why a virtuoso is serving drinks to scum like me." "I'm not a virtuoso," she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. "We'll see." Enzo reached into his pocket and pulled out a gold money clip. He peeled off a $100 bill and tucked it into the pocket of her apron, his knuckles grazing her breast. Sophie gasped. "Consider that a down payment," Enzo said. "Tomorrow night, you don't wait tables. You play for me. Only me." "And if I refuse?" Sophie challenged a spark of her father's fire, returning. Enzo leaned down, his face inches from hers. She could smell the expensive scotch and tobacco on his breath. "Then I find out where you live," he said, "and I ask the questions I want to ask. And I don't think you want me digging into your past, do you? Because eyes like yours, they're hiding secrets, and I love secrets." He pulled back, straightened his tie, ignoring the stain, and signaled to Rocco. "Take her home," Enzo ordered. "Make sure she gets to her door safely. If she tries to run, bring her to the penthouse." As Enzo walked away into the shadows of the club, Sophie realized with a sinking heart that she hadn't just played a song. She had played right into the devil's hands. And this devil didn't just want her music, he wanted her soul. The morning sun did not bring relief. It brought a black SUV with tinted windows. Sophie Bennett sat on the edge of her sagging mattress in her tiny studio apartment in Queens. The walls were paper-thin, vibrating with the sound of her neighbor's television. But Sophie couldn't hear it. All she could hear was the echo of Enzo Valenti's voice. "You belong to me now." She had spent the night staring at the door, waiting for the other shoe to drop. She had packed a bag, intending to run to catch a Greyhound bus to anywhere, Montana maybe, or deep into the Dakotas. But when she opened her front door at 6:00 a.m., she found a man in a dark suit standing in the hallway, reading a newspaper. He hadn't said a word, just glanced at her and tapped his earpiece. They were watching her. She was trapped. At 7:00 p.m. sharp, a knock rattled the door. It was Rocco. "Boss is waiting," the giant man grunted. Sophie smoothed down the simple black dress she had bought at a thrift store. It was the nicest thing she owned, but she knew it looked cheap. She grabbed her coat and followed him. The ride to Manhattan was silent. The city lights blurred past the window streaks of red and gold that felt like prison bars. The car pulled up not to the gilded cage, but to a sleek glass skyscraper overlooking Central Park, the Valenti Tower. Rocco escorted her into a private elevator. As the numbers climbed, 40 to 50 or 60. Sophie's stomach dropped. They stepped out directly into a penthouse that smelled of teakwood and money. The view of the city was breathtaking, a sea of diamonds spread out below. But Sophie's eyes were drawn to the center of the massive living room. There, sitting like a black beast on a Persian rug, was a Steinway Model D concert grand piano. It was the Rolls-Royce of instruments. Enzo was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, a glass of wine in his hand. He wore a white dress shirt, the top buttons undone, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and ink. He didn't turn around when she entered. "Do you know how much a Steinway D costs, Sophie?" he asked, his voice reflecting off the glass. "About $200,000, she answered automatically before she could catch herself. Enzo turned, a smirk playing on his lips. "For a waitress who claims to be a high school dropout from Ohio, you have expensive knowledge." He walked over to a coffee table where a manila folder lay open. He picked up a piece of paper. "Sophie Bennett," he read aloud. "Born in Dayton. Parents died in a car crash in 2018. No siblings. Social security number issued surprisingly recently." He dropped the paper. "It's a good fake. My guy in the NYPD says it holds up to a basic scan. But if you dig deeper, it's a ghost." He closed the distance between them, his presence overwhelming. Sophie had to tilt her head back to look him in the eye. "Who are you running from?" he asked softly. "An ex-boyfriend, the law? Or did you steal from someone more dangerous than me?" "I didn't steal anything," Sophie said, her voice trembling but firm. "I just wanted a fresh start. Is that a crime?" "In my world, secrets are currency, and right now you're in debt." Enzo gestured to the piano. "Play. I had this tuned this morning just for you. If you lie to me again about your talent, I'll have Rocco throw you off the balcony." He was testing her. He wanted to see if the night before was a fluke. Sophie walked to the piano. She sat on the plush bench. The keys were ivory cool and smooth. This instrument was a masterpiece. It begged to be played. Despite her fear, a spark of excitement ignited in her chest. She hadn't played a piano of this caliber since her final recital at Juilliard, before her father's trial destroyed everything. She began to play Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the third movement presto agitato. It was a storm of notes, fast, furious, demanding absolute precision. Sophie let her anxiety pour into the music. She played for the fear of being found for the father she couldn't save, for the life she had to murder to survive. Her fingers flew a blur of motion, striking the keys with a power that seemed impossible for her slender frame. Enzo watched her from the sofa. He had expected her to be good, but this was transcendence. He saw the way her face contorted with emotion, the way she bit her lip as the tempo increased. She wasn't just playing notes. She was screaming in a language only he seemed to understand. Enzo felt a strange tightening in his chest. He was a man who dealt in violence and vice, yet here was something pure. When she finished, the silence in the penthouse was heavier than before. "Sophia," Enzo said. Sophie froze. Her hands hovered over the keys. He had guessed her name, or half of it. "That's a name that fits you better." He continued, walking over to pour her a glass of water. He placed it on the piano. "Sophie is a mousy girl who spills drinks. Sophia, she is a storm." He leaned against the piano, crossing his arms. "Here is the arrangement. You don't work at the club anymore. You don't serve drinks to low-level thugs who look at you like a piece of meat. You stay here, in the guest wing." Sophie stood up so fast the bench scraped backward. "I can't live here." "You don't have a choice," Enzo said coldly. "I made some calls today. It seems a man named Victor Draven has been asking questions around the city, asking about a girl with green eyes and a specific talent for classical music." The blood drained from Sophie's face. Victor Draven, the man who had orchestrated the corruption charges against her father. The man who had sent the text message the night her father committed suicide in his cell. "We know about your daughter, Judge. Resign or she pays." "You know Draven," she whispered. "I know everyone," Enzo replied. "Draven is a snake. He works for the Russians. If he is looking for you, he will find you in that rat hole in Queens within a week. And when he finds you—" Enzo trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. "Why would you help me?" Sophie asked, tears pricking her eyes. "I'm nothing to you." Enzo reached out his thumb, tracing the line of her jaw. His touch was rough, calloused, yet surprisingly gentle. "Because you have something I want," he murmured. "You have fire, and I'm bored of the ice in this city." He stepped back. "Rocco will bring your things. You are under my protection now, Sophia. But protection comes with a price. You play for me every night. and you tell me the truth. All of it." Sophie looked at the man who was essentially her jailer. He was dangerous, lethal, and terrifying. But outside these walls, Victor Draven was hunting her. She was trapped between a wolf and a snake. She chose the wolf. "My name," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "is Sophia Castellan." Enzo's eyes widened slightly. "Castellan, Judge Castellan's daughter." She nodded, a tear finally escaping. Enzo cursed softly in Italian. He knew the story. Everyone knew the story of the honest judge who had been framed and driven to suicide 3 years ago. The city had chewed him up. Enzo looked at her with a new expression. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was respect. "Well then, Sophia Castellan," Enzo said, raising his glass. "Welcome to the family. Let's see if we can keep you alive long enough to finish the concerto." 2 weeks had passed since Sophia moved into the Valenti penthouse. Her life had fallen into a bizarre, opulent rhythm. During the day, she was left alone in the sprawling apartment. She had access to a library filled with first editions, a kitchen stocked with gourmet food, and of course the Steinway. She practiced for hours, trying to drown out the anxiety that constantly hummed beneath her skin. At night, Enzo returned. Sometimes he was covered in bruises. Sometimes he smelled of gunpowder. But he always showered, changed, and sat with a glass of scotch to listen to her play. He rarely spoke during these sessions, but his gaze never left her. It was intimate in a way that made Sophia's skin prickle, not with fear, but with a confusing magnetic heat. She was learning that Enzo Valenti was a man of contradictions. He was ruthless to his enemies. She heard him ordering hits over the phone as casually as ordering pizza, but he treated her with a strange, possessive reverence. He never touched her without permission, never forced himself on her. He just watched and listened, as if her music was the only thing keeping his own demons at bay. Then came the invitation. "Wear this," Enzo said one Tuesday evening, tossing a garment bag onto the sofa. Sophia opened it to reveal a gown of emerald green silk, backless and daring. "What is this for?" "The mayor's charity gala," Enzo said, adjusting his cufflinks. "We're going out." "I can't go out," Sophia panicked. Draven will be there." Enzo cut her off. "That is exactly why we are going." Sophia stared at him. "Are you insane? You said he's looking for me." "He is looking for a scared girl, hiding in the shadows," Enzo said, walking over to her. He gripped her shoulders. "He is not looking for the woman on the arm of Lorenzo Valenti. Hiding makes you look guilty, Sophia. Walking into the lion's den with the biggest predator in the jungle that makes you untouchable." "You're using me as bait," she accused. "I'm using you to send a message," he corrected, "that you are mine. And what is mine, nobody touches." An hour later, Sophia looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. The dress hugged her curves like a second skin. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, revealing the long line of her neck. Enzo had given her a necklace, a stunning string of diamonds and emeralds. "It belonged to my mother," he had said simply when he clasped it around her neck. The weight of it felt like a collar, but also like armor. They arrived at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where the gala was being held. The paparazzi flashbulbs blinded her as they stepped out of the limousine. Enzo placed a hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the chaos. His touch was firm, grounding. Inside the Temple of Dendur was transformed into a ballroom. The elite of New York were there, politicians, celebrities, and the crime bosses who pulled their strings. Sophia kept her head high, channeling the stage presence she had learned at the conservatory. She felt eyes on her instantly. Men stared with lust. Women stared with envy, but when they saw Enzo's cold glare, they quickly looked away. "Breathe," Enzo whispered in her ear. "You're doing fine." They circulated the room. Enzo introduced her simply as Sophia, offering no last name, which only fueled the mystery. She navigated the small talk, her heart pounding against her ribs. Then she saw him. Standing near the champagne fountain was Victor Draven. He looked exactly the same as he did in the nightmares, slicked back grey hair, a face like a ferret, and eyes that held zero morality. He was laughing with the police commissioner. Sophia's breath hitched, her vision blurred. The sounds of the party, the clinking glasses, the string quartet faded into a high-pitched ringing. She felt the phantom sensation of her father's cold hand in hers at the morgue. Draven turned. His gaze swept over the crowd and landed on her. He frowned. He tilted his head, recognition flickering in his eyes. He took a step toward her. Sophia stumbled back, bumping into a waiter. A tray of flutes crashed to the floor. The noise silenced the nearby crowd. Draven was coming closer, his eyes locking onto hers like a radar. He knew. Suddenly, a wall of black fabric blocked her view. Enzo had stepped in front of her. "Victor!" Enzo said, his voice booming and jovial, though his eyes were deadly. "I didn't know they let rats into the museum. I thought they had exterminators for that." Draven stopped, his fake smile straining. "Lorenzo, always a pleasure. And who is your lovely companion?" "She looks familiar." Enzo didn't move an inch. He radiated a menace so palpable that the people around them took a step back. "She looks like the future Mrs. Valenti." Enzo lied smoothly, loud enough for the nearby gossip columnists to hear. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Sophia looked up at Enzo's broad back in shock. "Is that so?" Draven sneered, trying to look around Enzo to see Sophia. "I could have sworn she was the daughter of an old friend. A judge." Enzo stepped closer to Draven, invading his personal space. He lowered his voice, but Sophia heard every word. "Listen to me closely, Victor. If you look at her again, I will pluck your eyes out. If you say her name, I will cut out your tongue. She is with me. That means she is dead to your world. Do you understand?" Draven's smile faltered. He looked at Enzo's clenched fists, then at the Valenti soldiers who had quietly materialized from the shadows of the room. "I understand," Draven muttered. "My mistake. Just a resemblance." "Good," Enzo said. He turned back to Sophia, his face softening instantly. "Let's dance." He pulled her onto the dance floor before she could protest. The string quartet began a waltz. Enzo held her close, his hand warm on her waist. "You lied," Sophia whispered, her legs still trembling. "Mrs. Valenti?" "It was the only way to make him back off permanently," Enzo said, spinning her. "If you are my fiancé, you are untouchable by the laws of the commission. Killing a wife starts a war. Killing a girlfriend is just business." "So it's just a tactic," she said. Feeling a strange pang of disappointment she couldn't explain. Enzo looked down at her. The lights of the gala reflected in his dark eyes. He pulled her slightly closer, so their bodies were pressed together. "I didn't say that," he murmured. For a moment, the danger Draven and the past faded away. There was just the music and the man who had saved her. But the moment was shattered when a man approached them on the dance floor. It was Luca Enzo's consigliere. He looked pale. "Enzo," Luca whispered urgently. "We have a problem. The police just raided the warehouse in the Bronx. Someone tipped them off about the shipment." Enzo stopped dancing. His face hardened into stone. "Who?" he demanded. "They say Luca glanced at Sophia nervously. They say the tip came from a payphone in Queens, 2 weeks ago, the day she disappeared from her apartment. Enzo slowly let go of Sophia. He looked at her, the warmth in his eyes instantly replaced by a glacial suspicion. Queens, Enzo repeated. Enzo, no. Sophia shook her head, realizing what was happening. I didn't. Get her into the car, Enzo ordered Luca, his voice devoid of emotion. Take her back to the penthouse. Lock her in the room. Enzo, please, it wasn't me, Sophia cried out as Luca grabbed her arm. Enzo turned his back on her, walking toward the exit to deal with his war. The fairy tale was over. The beast was back. The penthouse, once a sanctuary of music and unexpected warmth, had transformed into a cold, sterile prison. Enzo didn't return for 3 hours. When he finally walked through the double doors, the air temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. He had removed his tuxedo jacket and tie. His white shirt was stained with fresh blood, not his own. His knuckles were raw. Sophia was sitting on the sofa, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. She stood up immediately when he entered. Enzo. She started, her voice shaking. You have to listen to me. Enzo ignored her. He walked straight to the bar, poured a glass of vodka, and downed it in one swallow. He slammed the glass down, shattering it. I have lost 5 men tonight, Enzo said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble. He turned to face her. His eyes were dead. The warmth she had seen on the dance floor was gone, replaced by the abyss. 5 good men. Fathers. Brothers. Because the police knew exactly where to be, and when to be there. I didn't tell them anything, Sophia cried, tears streaming down her face. I don't even know where your warehouses are. I've been locked in this apartment for 2 weeks. The tip came from a payphone, 2 blocks from your old apartment, Enzo snarled, stalking toward her. He looked like a predator cornering wounded prey. The timestamp matches the morning before Rocco picked you up. You made the call, then you waited for us to come get you. It was a setup from the start. Draven sent you to infiltrate me? No. Sophia backed away until she hit the edge of the piano. Draven killed my father. Why would I work for him? Money, fear, leverage. Enzo stopped inches from her. It doesn't matter. What matters is that I let you in. I let you play my piano. I let you wear my mother's necklace. He reached out and ripped the emerald necklace from her neck. The clasp snapped, scratching her skin, but she was too terrified to feel the pain. I trusted you, Enzo whispered, and the heartbreak in his voice was more frightening than his anger. And that is a mistake I never make. Enzo, look at me. Sophia grabbed his hand, risking everything. If I were a spy, I would have run tonight at the gala. I would have gone to Draven when you were distracted. I stayed because... She faltered. Because what? Enzo challenged, his eyes, searching hers for a lie. Because I feel safe with you. She confessed, her voice barely a breath. Because you're the only one who really hears me. Enzo stared at her. For a second, his mask slipped. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to pull her into his arms and forget the blood on his hands. But in his world, love was a weakness and trust was a death sentence. He pulled his hand away as if she had burned him. Safety is an illusion, he said coldly. And you are done playing games. He walked over to the Steinway. He grabbed the lid and slammed it shut with a deafening crash. He took a small gold key from his pocket, locked the fallboard over the keys, and then walked to the balcony door and threw the key out into the New York night. Sophia gasped a sound of pure physical pain. "No." "Silence," Enzo commanded. "You don't play anymore. You don't speak unless spoken to. You stay in this room until I decide what to do with you. If you try to leave, the guards outside will not be as gentle as Rocco." "You might as well kill me," Sophia sobbed, sinking to the floor. "Taking the music, that's killing me." "I know," Enzo said. He looked at her one last time, a flicker of regret warring with his rage. "That's why I did it." He turned and walked out, leaving her in the deafening silence of the penthouse. For the next 2 days, Sophia existed in a grey haze. She didn't eat. She didn't sleep. She sat by the locked piano, tracing the wood grain with her fingers, hearing the music in her head, but unable to release it. It was a psychological torture worse than any physical pain Enzo could have inflicted. She spent her time replaying the events, the payphone call, the timing. Who else knew? Who else could have set her up? It had to be someone on the inside. Someone who knew Enzo had found her. Someone who wanted to destroy Enzo's focus. On the 3rd night, a storm rolled over the city. Thunder shook the glass walls of the penthouse. The elevator dinged. Sophia looked up, expecting Enzo. But it wasn't Enzo. It was Luca, the consigliere. He walked in, smiling. But it wasn't the polite smile he usually wore. It was a sneer. He held a suppressed pistol in his hand. "Good evening, Miss Castellan," Luca said smoothly. "Pack your things. We're going for a ride." "Where is Enzo?" Sophia asked, standing up. A cold dread pooled in her stomach. "Enzo is currently on his way to a meeting at the docks, a peace summit I arranged with Draven." Luca chuckled. "He thinks he's going to negotiate for your life. He's going to walk into a slaughter." Sophia's eyes widened. The pieces clicked into place. "It was you," she whispered. "You made the call. You tipped the cops." "Very good," Luca applauded slowly. "I knew you were smart. Yes, it was me. You see, Enzo has gone soft. Ever since you showed up with your sad eyes and your piano, he's been distracted. He's not the butcher anymore. He's a lovesick puppy, and the Valenti family cannot be led by a puppy." He raised the gun. "Draven promised me the territory if I delivered Enzo's head. And you're the cherry on top. Draven still has plans for the judge's daughter." "He'll kill you," Sophia said, her voice finding strength in her anger. "Enzo will kill you." "Enzo will be dead in an hour," Luca snapped. "Now move." He grabbed her arm and dragged her toward the elevator. Sophia struggled, kicking and scratching, but Luca was stronger. He pistol-whipped her across the temple. Blackness swam in her vision. Her knees buckled. "Pathetic," Luca spat. He dragged her semi-conscious body into the elevator. As the doors closed, the only thing Sophia could think of was Enzo. He was walking into a trap because of her. She had to warn him. But as the darkness took her, the silence of the locked piano seemed to scream her name. The docks of Red Hook smelled of salt-rotting fish and impending violence. Enzo Valenti stepped out of his armored SUV. The rain lashed against his face, washing away the hair gel, making him look wilder, more dangerous. He was alone. He had told his men to hang back. This was a parley. He walked toward the designated warehouse 4B. The sliding metal door was open a crack, revealing a dimly lit interior. Something felt wrong. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. It was too quiet. Draven was a man who liked fanfare. He wouldn't meet without guards visible. Enzo checked the Beretta in his waistband. He pushed the door open. "Draven!" he shouted, his voice echoing in the vast empty space. "I'm here. Let's finish this." No answer. Just the sound of rain drumming on the tin roof. Enzo walked deeper into the warehouse. In the center of the room, sitting on a wooden crate, was a small portable speaker. It was playing music. Enzo stopped. He recognized the piece instantly. It was the recording of Sophia playing the Moonlight Sonata, the one he had secretly recorded on his phone the first night she was at the penthouse. His heart hammered against his ribs. "It's a trap!" He spun around, drawing his gun just as the floodlights blazed to life, blinding him. "Bravo!" a voice shouted from the catwalk above. Enzo squinted against the glare. Victor Draven was standing on the metal railing, looking down like a king in his castle. Beside him, tied to a chair with duct tape over her mouth, was Sophia. She was conscious. Her eye was swollen shut, blood trickling down her forehead. She was struggling against the ropes, her eyes screaming a warning at him. And standing next to Draven holding a remote detonator was Luca. "Luca!" Enzo said, his voice calm, though a volcano of rage erupted inside him. "I should have known. You always did have shifty eyes." "It's just business, Enzo," Luca shouted down. "You lost your edge. You let a woman compromise the family. I'm just correcting the course." "By selling us to the Russians," Enzo spat. "You think Draven will let you live? You're a traitor, Luca. Traitors don't get retirement plans." Draven laughed. "He has a point, Luca, but for now you are useful." Draven leaned over the railing. "Here is the situation, Valenti. You put your gun on the floor. You kick it away, and then my men will come down and beat you to death. If you resist, if you even twitch..." Luca presses this button, and the lovely Sophia becomes fireworks. She's sitting on about 10 pounds of C4. Enzo looked at Sophia. She was shaking her head frantically, muffling sounds behind the tape. "Don't do it," she was trying to say. "Run." But Enzo Valenti didn't run, and he certainly didn't leave what was his. He looked at Sophia. He locked eyes with her. In that moment, a silent communication passed between them. He needed her to trust him one last time. "Okay," Enzo shouted. "You win." He slowly bent down and placed his gun on the concrete floor. He kicked it away. It skittered across the room. "Smart boy," Draven sneered. He whistled. From the shadows of the shipping containers, 12 armed men emerged. They carried baseball bats, chains, and knives. They wanted to make it painful. Enzo stood in the center of the circle, his hands raised. "Come on then," Enzo growled. "Who wants to die first?" The first man lunged with a bat. Enzo ducked, weaving with a boxer's speed. He punched the man in the throat, crushing his windpipe. The man dropped. The chaos began. It was a massacre. Enzo was a whirlwind of violence. He used their own weapons against them. He broke arms, shattered knees. He fought not like a man, but like a demon possessed. He fought for the woman tied to the chair above him. Up on the catwalk, Luca watched in horror. "He's killing them all. Shoot him." "No," Draven ordered. "I want to watch him bleed." Sophia saw her chance. Luca was distracted watching the fight below. He had set the detonator remote on the railing to lean over. She couldn't use her hands, but she had her legs, and she had rhythm. She began to rock the chair. Back and forth. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Like a metronome. Luca didn't notice. He was screaming at the men below. Enzo was tiring. He had taken a knife to the shoulder and a bat to the ribs. He was breathing heavy, surrounded by 6 men still standing. Sophia rocked harder. The chair legs lifted off the grate. With a final desperate lurch, she threw her body weight to the side. The chair tipped over. She crashed onto the metal grating floor of the catwalk. Her bound feet kicked out violently, aiming for the only thing that mattered. Her heel connected with Luca's shin. He yelped, stumbling. He reached out to steady himself, but his hand missed the railing. He flailed, hitting the remote detonator. Beep! But he didn't press the trigger. He knocked it off the railing. The remote fell. It tumbled through the air, down, down, down toward the concrete floor below. No! Draven screamed. Enzo saw the remote falling. He saw it landing near a puddle of water. If it shorted, or if the impact triggered the switch. Enzo didn't think. He acted. He grabbed the nearest thug, using him as a human shield, and rolled toward a stack of steel beams just as the remote hit the ground. Click. Silence. It didn't explode. The safety mechanism must have held, but the distraction was enough. Enzo pulled a backup piece, a small ankle revolver he never went without, and aimed upward. Bang! The bullet caught Luca right between the eyes. The traitor crumpled, falling over the railing and landing with a wet thud in the center of the warehouse. Draven stared at the dead body of his partner. He looked down at Enzo, who was now aiming the gun at him. "You missed," Draven snarled, pulling his own weapon. "I never miss," Enzo said. Draven looked confused. Then a massive metallic groan echoed through the warehouse. The bullet hadn't just killed Luca. It had severed the hydraulic line of the crane directly above the catwalk. A 2-ton shipping container suspended by the crane groaned and plummeted. Draven looked up just in time to scream. Crash! The container smashed into the catwalk, tearing the metal structure apart. Draven was crushed instantly, but Sophia was on the section of the catwalk that was now collapsing. "Enzo!" She screamed through her gag as the floor beneath her gave way. "Sophia!" Enzo roared. She fell. Enzo sprinted across the floor, ignoring the pain in his ribs, ignoring the remaining thugs who were fleeing in terror. She was falling 20 feet. Enzo slid on his knees, arms outstretched. It wasn't a graceful catch like in the movies. She hit him with the force of a wrecking ball. The impact drove the air from his lungs and cracked his head against the concrete. They sprawled together on the wet floor, tangled in ropes and chair legs. Dust and debris settled around them. For a long minute, neither of them moved. Then Enzo coughed. He groaned, rolling onto his side. He frantically ripped the tape off Sophia's mouth. "Sophia, Sophia, look at me." She gasped, her eyes fluttering open. She was bruised, battered, and terrified. But she was alive. "You came," she whispered, her voice broken. "You came for me." "I told you," Enzo wheezed, wiping blood from his eye. "You belong to me." He pulled a pocket knife and sliced her ropes. As soon as her hands were free, she threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his blood-soaked shirt. She sobbed, her entire body shaking. Enzo held her tight, kissing the top of her head. He looked around the warehouse. Bodies. Wreckage. Silence. He had won the war. But as he held the trembling pianist in his arms, he realized he had almost lost the only thing that made the victory matter. "Let's go home," Enzo whispered into her hair. "I think I need to find that key to the piano." The recovery was not a montage of romantic moments. It was a grueling, painful reality. Enzo Valenti spent 3 days in the ICU. and another week in a private room at Mount Sinai Hospital. His ribs were taped, his shoulder stitched, and his concussion left him sensitive to light. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the guilt that gnawed at him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sophia falling. Sophia miraculously had escaped with minor fractures and severe bruising. She refused to leave his bedside. She slept in the uncomfortable plastic chair, ate cafeteria food, and held his hand when the nightmares of the warehouse woke him up in a cold sweat. They didn't speak much about what had happened. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was the comfortable silence of two soldiers who had survived the same trench. When they finally returned to the penthouse, the atmosphere had changed. The winter sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The apartment no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a fortress. Enzo walked slowly, leaning on a cane he hated, toward the center of the room. He stopped in front of the Steinway. The lid was still shut, the fallboard locked. The silence of the instrument was a reminder of his cruelty. "I need to call a locksmith," Enzo muttered, running a hand over the black lacquer. "I threw the key away. I was a monster that night." Sophia walked up behind him. She didn't touch him, but he could feel her warmth. "You were hurt," she said softly. "You thought I betrayed you." "I should have known better." Enzo turned to face her. His dark eyes were filled with a vulnerability that the world never saw. "I should have known that someone with your soul couldn't sell it for money. I let my fear make me deaf." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Sophia's breath hitched. "Enzo." He opened it. Inside wasn't a diamond ring, but a small, shiny brass key. "I didn't throw it off the balcony." Enzo confessed, a sheepish half-smile touching his lips. "I threw a penny. I kept the key in my pocket the whole time. Because even when I hated you, I couldn't bear the thought of never hearing you play again." He handed her the key. "Open it. Please." Sophia took the key. Her fingers trembled as she inserted it into the lock. Click. She lifted the fallboard. The keys gleamed, welcoming her home. She sat down. She didn't play a storm this time. She played Debussy's Clair de Lune, soft, ethereal, and full of light. As the music filled the penthouse, washing away the memories of blood and gunpowder, Enzo sat on the floor beside the bench, closed his eyes, and finally let go of the war inside him. 6 months later, Carnegie Hall was sold out. The posters outside were simple yet striking. They featured a black and white photograph of a woman with intense eyes sitting at a piano. The text read, "The Return of Sophia Castellan." Backstage, the air was thick with hairspray and nervous energy. Sophia smoothed down her dress, a deep midnight blue velvet that shimmered under the lights. She looked at herself in the mirror. The girl who had waited tables at the Gilded Cage, terrified of her own shadow, was gone. In her place stood a woman who had walked through fire and come out holding the torch. "You look breathtaking," a voice came from the doorway. Enzo stood there. He looked different, too. The sharp, predatory edge was softened. He still wore the expensive suits, but he didn't look like a man hunting for a kill. He looked like a man at peace. "I'm nervous," Sophia admitted, turning to him. "What if they remember the scandal? What if they only see the judge's disgraced daughter?" Enzo walked over and took her hands. He kissed her knuckles one by one. "They won't see the past," he said firmly. "They will hear the future. I made sure of it." "You didn't threaten the critics, did you?" Sophia raised an eyebrow, half joking. "I didn't have to." Enzo grinned. "I just bought the newspaper. But that's beside the point. He pulled her close. You are Sofia Castellan, but you are also the woman who brought the Valenti family to its knees without firing a single shot. You saved my life. You saved my soul. This stage, it's small compared to what you've already conquered. A stagehand knocked on the door. 5 minutes, Miss Castellan. Enzo squeezed her hand. I'll be in the box. Front row. Center. I love you, Enzo, she whispered. I love you, il mio cuore, he replied, kissing her forehead. Sofia walked onto the stage. The applause was polite, curious. The audience was filled with New York's elite, many of whom had whispered about her father's suicide years ago. She sat at the piano. She adjusted the bench. She took a deep breath. She looked up at the private box on the right. Enzo was there, a silhouette in the darkness, watching over her. Her protector, her partner. Sofia smiled. She wasn't playing for the critics. She wasn't playing to clear her father's name. She was playing for the man who had forced her to play, to mock her, only to fall in love with the melody of her spirit. She raised her hands. She began to play. The music soared, powerful and triumphant. It told a story of loss, of fear, of violence, and ultimately of a love that defied the odds. As the final note resonated through the hallowed hall, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then the audience erupted. It wasn't just applause. It was a roar. People stood up. Bravos rang out. Sofia stood and bowed. She looked up at the box. Enzo was standing, clapping, a look of fierce pride on his face. She had been a waitress. She had been a prisoner. She had been a victim. But tonight, Sofia Castellan was the queen of New York. And the king was applauding the loudest of them all. And that is how a spilled glass of scotch changed the history of the New York underworld. Enzo Valenti wanted to break Sophia Bennett, to entertain his ego. But instead, he found the one piece of humanity he had lost. It's a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about how many guns you have or how loud you can shout. It's about the talent you possess and the resilience of the human spirit. Sofia turned her trauma into a symphony and turned a monster into a man. What did you think of Enzo's transformation? Do you think he deserved a second chance after how he treated her in the beginning? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of danger music and redemption, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.